Hey, what's going on, role players? Welcome back to the corner. So I know I haven't been around for a while, but that's because I've been spending all my time preparing, because I have a brand new little bard coming into the world. A new role player to share the great experience with. Of course, with all this time being dedicated to doing other things, such as sorting out family, having to go to work, working on projects, there's basically no time for anything. So when I'm doing my role playing, which is my one release from the realities of life, I don't want to waste time. And this is what really got me thinking. We should be looking as role players and gamers and DMs to try and get as much out of our game as we can. So wasting time or, being unclear on certain things really doesn't help. What steps can we take to make our role playing experience that much more streamlined? So yes, there are actually times when rolling less dice is actually more beneficial for your game. Let's take, for instance, something like the open lock skill, or the stealth skill, or the sleight of hand, or whatever it is your game is, that whatever mechanic it's using. So what tends to happen is you come to a door, it's locked, you try to pick the lock, you roll, you fail, and you say, well, I'll try again, so you roll, maybe you fail again, and eventually you get it. Instead of doing that, it would sometimes just be easier to say, for the GM to go, well, you spend a couple of minutes and eventually the lock clicks and it opens. There's not really a great deal of point in rolling because you're going to do it until it eventually opens anyway. So you want to look at the skills that you have and really try to streamline which ones are going to be necessary and which ones are somewhat redundant based on the scenario. Things like open lock, however, can be really great if you've got a scenario such as, well, here's an example. Your party walks into a room. Suddenly a cage drops down behind and they're locked in the room. There's a door on the other side which is locked, but the ceiling starts to slowly come down. Now, in that situation, how fast you can get through a locked door is going to be very important. But like in other situations, where there's no immediate danger, there's really no point in rolling because eventually you're going to get it anyway. And that's really the whole point that I'm trying to get across. If there's no immediate danger, if there's nothing that's going to really happen as a result of you getting it right or wrong, then perhaps, those are the skills that can just be pushed to the wayside. A lot of the social skills are also good ones that, you don't necessarily need to roll for. You should just be able to role play through them. In the instances where you're somewhere in between, you're not really sure if the player's argument is going to sway you, then you can, by all means, call for a roll. But the majority of the time, you can even get away with thinking, well, I'm kind of sure, not sure. The answer is typically no, So, you wouldn't go into any kind of monetary deal in real life only half sure about what you were going to get out of it. So, you could always argue the fact, well, I'm not really convinced, and therefore the situation or the skill attempt fails. So social ones, I find that social skills are a bit of a crutch that help role players who are new, which is good. It's good to help new role players, but it's something that you can end up relying on too much. And not actually making those rolls is really good just to force them to talk in the situations that they need to talk in. So social skills, probably one that can really be put to one side. As a GM, you can identify which of these skills you don't necessarily need to make rolls on a regular basis and then just role play them out. That's probably the best thing you can do. You're going to speed up your game and it's going to allow you to get more gaming time in, which is what we all really want. If there's one thing we're all guilty of, it's getting off topic, and I can be pretty bad at this myself. I'm a bit of a joker. I'm a prankster. I can't really help myself, but I need to try as a role player, as a GM. Whether I'm playing, whether I'm running the game, I need to really concentrate on what I'm doing. Because it's so easy for me to spout out a cutesy quip, or come up with a quote or whatever, but it gets off topic, and sometimes I'll come out with something and then it just steamrolls from there. We need to find fair but effective ways in order to stay on topic. Now, I find that in certain games where you're trying to set a mood, it is something that's very prominent. You're trying to get that sense of darkness, or that sense of fear, or that sense of horror, or isolation, or whatever it is you're trying to achieve. When you're trying to set a mood, someone will break the mood. And like I say, I'm guilty of this myself. But the best games are the ones where everyone is immersed. So we need to try, I think, to get that full immersion. So when someone says something and you've got a funny quote or whatever, sometimes it's just best to keep it to yourself. There are ways and means about it, however. And I find rewarding good role-playing behavior is probably going to be the best thing. Now, I'm going to experiment in some of my newer games that are coming up with various different tactics to try to promote better role-playing and try to get less of the off-topic conversations happening. So I'm going to try a little reward system that to promote some good behavior within my role players. But what I have to really be careful of, and this is something I really need to police myself very, very hard on, is I can't allow my predeterminations, my judgments, or my sensibilities to influence my decisions. Now, I've been a bit chastised on this in the past. Sometimes I have ideas or thoughts, and I'm not the most eloquent speaker, and I don't really express myself necessarily in the ways that I always want to. I can't allow my sensibilities to override people's role-playing. So if I think I don't like the way they said that, the opposite is actually true. Perhaps that is in and of itself a good role-playing part of what they're doing, because it creates mood, it creates tension. If you're creating an environment sometimes where people are feeling uncomfortable, it could, in theory, be a good representation of an interesting character flaw or character type, or a good bit of social manipulation. So there are benefits to what we could call negative interactions. So I have to be careful that I don't chastise people for their behavior, and instead are making sure that it's the out of game comments and the unnecessary things that is being knocked on the head, and not people's personal playstyle. So really be careful if you're going to incorporate anything like that. Really, really be careful and take into consideration how people play their game. So use reward systems to promote good role playing. Again, you want to just allow people the freedom to do and play their character the way it should be played. But there's the balance between that and knocking on the head the things which are causing distractions, pushing agendas, or creating disruption amongst your gaming group. So again, it's a very fine balance. But then again, everything is in life, isn't it? Preparation is very important for DMs because you need to be able to keep the game on track. You need to know where they're starting, where they're finishing, and exactly what's going to happen in between. You want to let them get there on their own steam, but again, that's a topic for another day. In fact, it's one I've already covered. But players should be just as prepared as well. They shouldn't really feel like they are being led around. So by that logic, they should feel like they are participating in the world and making it their own. So if that's the case, then the players need to be on the ball as well. They need to have their machinations in place. They need to start pushing their own characters' will into the world. So if you're a player, this is where this part comes in for you, the preparation part. Make sure you know what it is your character is out to achieve and start taking those steps to get there. Also, and this is on a smaller, more focused level, when it comes to things like, say, combat, for example, preparation just watch what's happening around the table. When it gets to your turn, it's great if you can know exactly what it is that you were going to do. So if someone is out creating the flanking situation, then you think, right, well, on my turn, I should probably then go into the opposite side and start attacking from that angle. And I'll use, whatever skills or benefits I have. So if you know ahead of time what it is you're going to do, get in and do it. There are going to be situations where one action will change what happens, and you have to think on the fly, but that's just real life. But if you can get it into a position where you can make things happen straight away, you just speed up the whole process. And it's perfect for combat, because combat is one of the longest parts of any game. It takes so long for people to do their combat round, when, ironically, it's actually usually one of the shortest parts in actual game terms. So if you can get prepared beforehand while someone else is making their turn, then you can quickly jump in and bang, get your turn on the go, fire off any spells you need to do, get into position, everything's done. Combat rolling is another thing. If you're going to be on the attack, what tends to happen is you make your attack roll and you ask whether it hits or misses, and then you roll your damage afterwards. It's just a little tiny thing, but maybe it'll be of some value to you. Grab your attack dice and grab your damage dice and toss them at the same time. If you just do that and say, right, I rolled 20 to hit, does that hit? If your DM says yes, then you can instantly, as soon as he has finished saying yes or no, you can go, in that case I deal 10 damage. Because you've already rolled it. And if you miss on your attack dice, you can just ignore the other one. It's a tiny little time saver, but if everyone's doing it, if you've got, say, 5 people around the table, DM plus 4 players, and everyone does it that way, and the game lasts 5 rounds or whatever, you can probably save a minute or two in just not picking up the dice and rolling again and calculating, So it might not seem like much, but depending on how many combats you have a night, it could, in fact, save you a few extra minutes, if nothing else. Prevention is better than cure in most situations. So something like a miniature map, a grid, something you can place some counters on, is usually a good thing. If you just lay it down at the beginning of the day, beginning of the game session, and then, when a combat does arise, just drop a couple counters down where necessary, and then the players can drop their counters down where necessary. Then you have a nice visual representation then, which doesn't take too long to set up. What it helps prevent is, I was flanking. It's like, I don't think you were. I think you would have had to get past X, Y, and Z in order to get to a flanking position. Or you're going to catch such and such in that spell effect, and everyone's going to be hit, party members included. If you can see straight in front of you what's going to happen and how it's going to happen and who it's going to affect, it can save a lot of time, and it can save a lot of debate as well. It might seem like a little extra setup time, but you don't know when a situation is going to arise where you're trying to prove your point or debate your point. So sometimes it's for the better. So if the map is already down, if you've got a grid or something already down on the table, then I think you can save a lot of time. And like I say, prevention is better than cure. You might not think that these things are going to happen, but for people who are coming up with convoluted tactics, oftentimes these processes really help to cement exactly who is where and what is happening. Speaking of prevention being better than cure, there's a lot to be said for having your spells prepared correctly. Spell slingers should take into consideration using certain things like throwaway cards or whatever. Just you could have it like a deck if you would. You can then just look and see which spells you have prepared, and then you could say, all right, I cast Mirror Image, Fireball, Hand of Death or whatever, and then just take that card and put it to one side so you have a visual representation of what spells you have available rather than having to look them up on the sheet. So that could be a nice way around it. Similarly, if you are a spell slinger, you don't want to actually forget about your defensive spells, because if you're well defended, you don't have to waste a whole bunch of time with healing afterwards. So again, it's just, you can save time. So there is a lot to be said for having a well-prepared spell list and also a well-prepared combat tactic which you're going to use. So for you spell slingers out there, try to find ideas and ways in which you can keep your spells recorded easily. Not really as big a deal for, say, games like 5th edition, where it's a case of you just memorize X amount and then you can use pretty much what you want when you want. But for older games like, say, 3rd edition, having a representation in front of you where you can just go, oh, I'll cast that, and you just throw it down, or you can check it off or whatever as used, very, very handy. Alright, so that's enough of that, guys. So ultimately what we're trying to do is find some way to just speed up our game, stay on topic, and just make the experience as good as we can. What I might do in the interest of speeding things up for people is I might look at doing some small one-off adventures and posting them here on YouTube so that people can just watch through them, follow them, and then make some notes and run quick one-nighters. Or if there's a piece of an adventure that you want to use, or if you've got a large campaign but you don't know what you're going to do for that night, then maybe I'll just maybe you can take that and change it and modify it or something. If that's something that you think you would like, or you could make use of, then let me know, because if there's enough interest in it, then I'll start doing some and posting them up here. Anyway, that's enough for today. If you like the video, you know what to do, all the usual YouTube spiel, like, comment, subscribe, and all that nonsense. And I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.